Hey, so this is going to be a reading from The Conversation, and this is Hinduism and its complicated history with cows and people who eat them. Okay, this is from July 17th, 2017, and who is it written by? Wendy Doniger. Wendy Doniger, who is Distinguished Service Professor of the History of Religions at the University of Chicago. Disclosure statement: Wendy Doniger does not work for, consult, own shares, or receive funding from any company or organization that would benefit from this article, and has disclosed no relevant affiliations beyond their academic appointment. So it's kind of interesting to see this kind of site where, the conversation is academic rigor with journalistic flair. So I guess it's more kind of giving more of I think, a more personable layman's version of actual papers, actual research papers and things like that. I don't know. Anyway, let's get right into the reading. So it's about an 8-minute read. I'm going to read that and then give some comments after it. Getting into it now. Just this past June, at a national meeting of various Hindu organizations in India, a popular preacher, Sadhvi Saraswati, suggested that those who consumed beef should be publicly hanged. Later, at the same conclave, an animal rights activist, Chetan Sharma, said, "Cow is also the reason for global warming. When she is slaughtered, something called EPW is released, which is directly responsible for global warming. It's what is called emotional pain waves." These provocative remarks come at a time when vigilante Hindu groups in India are lynching people for eating beef. Such killings have increased since Narendra Modi, and his right-wing Bharatiya Janata Party came to power in September 2014. In September 2015, a 50-year-old Muslim man, Muhammad Akhlaq, was lynched by a mob in a village near New Delhi on suspicion that he had consumed beef. Since then, many attacks by cow vigilante groups have followed. Modi's government has also prohibited the slaughter of buffalo, thus destroying the Muslim-dominated buffalo meat industry and causing widespread economic hardship. Most people seem to assume that no Hindu has ever consumed beef, but is this true? As a scholar studying Sanskrit, an ancient Indian religion, for over 50 years, I know of many texts that offer a clear answer to this question. Cows in ancient Indian history. Scholars have known for centuries that the ancient Indians ate beef. After the 4th century BC, when the practice of vegetarianism spread through India among Buddhists, Jains, and Hindus, many Hindus continued to eat beef. In the time of the oldest Hindu sacred text, the Rig Veda, which was around 1500 BC, cow meat was consumed. Like most cattle breeding cultures, the Vedic Indians generally ate the castrated steers, but they would eat the female of the species during rituals or when welcoming a guest or a person of high status. Ancient ritual texts known as Brahmanas, circa 900 BC, and other texts that taught religious duty, dharma, from the 3rd century BC, say that a bull or cow should be killed to be eaten when a guest arrives. According to these texts, quote, "the cow is food," unquote. Even when one passage in the Shatapatha Brahmana 3.1.2.21 forbids the eating of either cow or bull, a revered ancient Hindu sage named Yajnavalkya immediately contradicts it, saying that nevertheless he eats the meat of both cow and bull, quote, "as long as it is tender," unquote. It was the Sanskrit epic, the Mahabharata, composed between 300 BC and AD 300, that explained the transition to the non-eating of cows in a famous myth. Quote, "Once when there was a great famine, King Prithu took up his bow and arrow and pursued the earth to force her to yield nourishment for his people. The earth assumed the form of a cow and begged him to spare her life. She then allowed him to milk her for all that the people needed." Unquote. This myth imagines a transition from hunting wild cattle to preserving their lives, domesticating them, and breeding them for milk, a transition to agriculture and pastoral life. It visualizes the cow as a paradigmatic animal that yields food without being killed. Beef eating and caste. Some Dharma texts composed in this same period insist that the cow should not be eaten. Some Hindus who did not eat meat made a special exception and did not eat the meat of cow. Such people may have regarded beef eating in the light of what the historian Romila Thapar describes as, quote, matter of status, unquote. The higher the caste, the greater the food restrictions. Various religious sanctions were used to impose prohibition on beef eating, but as Thapar demonstrates, only among the upper castes. As I see it, the arguments against eating cow are a combination of a symbolic argument about female purity and docility, symbolized by the cow who generously gives her milk to her calf, a religious argument about Brahmin sanctity, as Brahmins came increasingly to be identified with cows and to be paid by donation of cows, and a way for castes to rise in social ranking. Sociologist M.N. Srinivas pointed out that the lower castes gave up beef when they wanted to move up the social ladder through the process known as Sanskritization. By the 19th century, the cow protection movement had arisen. One of the implicit objects of this movement was the oppression of Muslims. Famously, Gandhi attempted to make vegetarianism, particularly the taboo against eating beef, a central tenet of Hinduism. Gandhi's attitude to cows was tied to his idea of nonviolence. He used the image of the earth cow, the one that King Prithu milked, as a kind of Mother Earth to symbolize his imagined Indian nation. His insistence on cow protection was a major factor in his failure to attract large-scale Muslim support. Yet even Gandhi never called for the banning of cow slaughter in India. He said, quote, "How can I force anyone not to slaughter cows unless he himself is disposed? It is not as if there were only Hindus in the Indian Union. There are Muslims, Parsis, Christians, and other religious groups here." Unquote. Today's India. From my perspective, in our day, the nationalist and fundamentalist Hindutva, Hinduness movement is attempting to use this notion of the sanctity of a cow to disenfranchise Muslims. And it is not only the beef-eating Muslims and Christians who are the target of Hindutva's hate brigade. Lower caste Hindus are also being attacked. Attacks of this type are not new. This has been going on since Hindutva began in 1923, and indeed, in 2002, in a North Indian town, 5 lower caste Hindus were lynched for skinning a cow. But as local analysis shows, the violence has greatly increased under the Modi government. IndiaSpend, a data journalism initiative, found that, quote, Muslims were the target of 51% of violence centered on bovine issues over nearly 8 years, 2010 to 2017, and comprised 86% of 28 Indians killed in 63 incidents. As many of 97% of these attacks were reported after Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government came to power in 2014. Unquote. In 2015, in the western Indian state of Gujarat, lower caste Hindus were flogged for skinning a dead cow, triggering spontaneous street protests and contributing to the resignation of the state's chief minister. As these and so many other recent attacks demonstrate, cows, innocent, docile animals, have become in India a lightning rod for human cruelty in the name of religion. So that's it for the article. Now some of my thoughts on the things that were in here. First of all, I just think it's kind of interesting to see that this was also a caste thing. I don't believe in this whole cultural relativism thing. If you actually have a culture that has these actual castes that you're born into, that, oh, you're born as an untouchable, or you're born as a Brahmin, so you're just better than these people. And that's how they look at it. They look at it that the Brahmins are better. The lowest caste is literally the untouchables. These are people that you're not supposed to touch. These are the filthiest people in the world. And these are set castes in that culture. If I had an option of living in a culture like that, or one where there's supposedly systemic racism, but then I can still move around in it, I think the one with this supposed systemic racism is better. I think a caste system is a negative thing. But it's interesting to see how you look at veganism, you look at vegetarianism in the West, and you look at the class situation. And I think classes are a lot more important than when you look at races. Because you go all around the world, and even within groups that you think this is one group, people will look at Indians and say, oh, aren't those just Indian people? People will come to somewhere like Kenya, where I'm at right now. They'll look at it, oh, isn't that just Kenyan people? People will even in Kenya, they'll look at different tribes and say, oh, the Kikuyu tribe, aren't they just Kikuyus? Or are these just Luyas? But even within those tribes, within these groups, there is a class structure where it's like, okay, this person has been born into this family with this kind of level of something, and they have that. So they have more informal castes, but I think class system is it's something that's very real, and I think we should focus on that a lot more than focusing on things like race and all these arbitrary things. Now, interesting thing in the West, you look at the people who are actually going into vegetarianism, veganism, and things like this, it is normally middle class, upper middle class people. And in these situations, I think it's part of that. It is part of that. Oh, we are at a higher class. We care more about these other things. It's more, there is a big aspect of it where there is a social signal, there's a virtue signaling aspect of it. And in these cases, these people also have enough access to resources, enough access to foods and nutrition where they can get the actual proteins and other nutritional benefits that you would get from something as plentiful as beef, because the cow itself is a rather large docile animal. It was mentioned here, large docile animal that gives you a lot of nutrients in a simple, quick kind of way. So now, if you're a Brahmin, you're in a higher class, you're getting more money. If you're an upper middle class American living in a major city, you have more access to certain foods and supplements and things to supplement your diet and get into a situation. So I think that's kind of interesting to see. Now here, there was also something I mentioned of Gandhi here. If you actually look at the history of Gandhi, Gandhi has had some issues. He's not as as kosher, I'd say, as some people might think he is. People just see, oh, this peaceful man, but no, he had certain things. He was a rather racist man. He had some issues with women that you should look into. Just look into the actual history of who Gandhi was as a man. So it's kind of interesting to see here that, oh, he was somewhat targeting them. They said here, famously, Gandhi attempted to make vegetarianism, particularly the taboo against eating beef, a central tenet of Hinduism. I think he was trying to differentiate Hinduism. He was trying to make it something that is in and of itself. I think this seems to be more of another purity test towards it. I think he might have seen that aspect of the Brahmins that had that, and he was like, okay, let's have all of us do it. Let's spread it to everybody else. But it's still a thing where it otherizes you from other people. Now, he wasn't saying it has to be something that's completely banned in the nation, but he's like, look, within this nation, we will have these special Hindus, and we will defer ourselves, we'll put ourselves apart even further from these other people by our dietary decisions. And there is something in that. There's this whole you are what you eat, you are what you consume. It goes further from just your physical things that you physically eat, but also what you consume mentally. So I think they're looking, okay, the Brahmins are doing this. If the Brahmins are the top versions of Hinduism, why don't we take more features of what the Brahmins are doing and spread it into the whole group of Hinduism? So this might have even come from a position where he wanted Hinduism itself to be more inclusive within Hinduism, even though making it more inclusive for all Hindus might have made it more exclusive. It might exclude the other people even more by having that separation. Now, what else was in here that I thought was interesting? There was something in here they're talking about the whole situation. That's that first thing where you're talking about the EPW, emotional pain waves that actually affect global warming. And this is what I've said. With the global warming, it is a religion. It is a religious thing. Some of these things being thrown in there, and I was thinking, some of the global warming people, if they just prayed, they would actually get a lot more of, I think a lot more people on the political right who are against it might be doing it subconsciously because they know it's also like an opposing religion. But a lot of people on the political right want religious beliefs to be respected. So what if the people on the left started couching it in this sense, where they say, it's my religious belief, I believe by my religion that climate change is happening? It might be something to look into. It might be able to give you some more protection on what you're talking about as somebody who is a climate alarmist. Now, still on the topic of climate change, this is the whole thing where people just don't know history. When we talk about the climate change, what are we talking about? How long are we talking about? Where did these figures come from? Who's studying this? What material are you taking this? Now, that's the same thing with this. Most people just think Hindus don't eat beef. I used to think that. I mean, part of the reason I was like, okay, this came up and I was like, why did it even start? And I looked and I found this information, and we have this ability here. So we have this situation where people are talking about, oh, Burger King is under attack, or oh, these people are under attack there. These people are in the West are under attack from eating meat, or the vegans, the PETA people are just crazy and like, oh, they're damning us. They're doing this and this. They're crazy. They need to stop. They're not out there killing people. Other places, other cultures, there's people still literally killing people for eating beef. How ridiculous is that? How many of the people killing the people actually realize how it came to be in their culture? And I would be very surprised if more than 25% of the people who actually involved in these killings, if that, actually understood the history of when this whole anti-beef thing came to be in Hinduism. People are probably just born into it and they just believe it. They take it on faith that this is a holy animal and they do that. Like, I'm not supposed to respect this. I do not respect this. People say, oh, you're supposed to respect religion. I do not respect a belief like this that says a cow is sending out emotional pain waves, and it's some Hindu text that the earth became the cow, and then it was milked, and then now you're supposed to kill other people for eating cows, or even just skinning cows. That is ridiculous. Now, when people talk about, oh, the Christians are talking about they're actually persecuted. Muslims here in the United States of America, in the West, in places like that, even here in Kenya, they're talking about, oh, there's some persecution, there's some kind of situation they go through. Are they getting killed for literally skinning a cow? A Muslim can go and skin any animal they want in the United States of America, and I doubt there's going to be some religious group, even the Hindus in the United States of America, because I think the West itself, something about the West tempers these backward, nonsensical beliefs and changes them to a situation where it's more secular, where it's more humanist. People care more. People understand there's actual more rationality you can go into this thing. You can't just go killing people for skinning cows. Come on. What's going on in this thing? So, what do you guys think about this? How many of you knew about these things? How many of you are going to eat some beef today and just be like, nom, 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 beef. I'm so happy about this beef. I'm glad I'm not in India where I would be killed for this if I was living in a certain place. Next time you bite into a burger, really think about that and really enjoy that. Now, maybe something like the Impossible Burger and things like that, maybe that will get to a situation where you have that and you take that to India and then that saves people's lives because people are eating beef now. But then the cost of the Impossible Burger is another thing, the amount of money that's spent in that, the actual ecological effect of actually creating something like the Impossible Burger. There might also be other elements in that Impossible Burger that somebody might come up with some reason for why it's against some kind of religion and things like that, and this thing might continue. I don't know. I don't know what happens with these things. Anyway, that's it for this video. Like, share, and subscribe. Goodbye. Okay, a few added comments that I was thinking about while editing this, some few things that I missed. One thing that I think was key was them talking about how the cow itself is an embodiment of Mother Earth, this feminine nature, and it's held to be divine. And this is a key thing. Even if you have a patriarchal type of religion, like Christianity, for example, with the male God who's depicted in a male sense, they still have a key part of him bringing Jesus in onto earth through a virginal female. I know it might be mistranslation from young woman, but when you have Catholicism, which was the main, I think it still is the main form of Christianity out there, but they almost worship Mary in the sense where she's actually elevated to that sense. He's actually the one human that's elevated because the Holy Ghost, God, they're divine. Jesus is man made into flesh, but she is a human who's been put higher. She can't even be touched. She has to be virginal in that kind of sense where even if it's a mistranslation, but you see that aspect where she is an embodiment of something divine and something high above us. Now, for sure, I don't want to look at the situation and say, oh, look how bad it is there, so you don't have to worry about what's going on in your place. But what is the driving reason that you have so many issues? What is the driving reason, the central reason, the core reason that this is an issue? This whole cow thing is an issue and all the things that came around it. That whole idea, oh, we're persecuting the Muslims now because they don't do this. It comes off of faith. It comes off of belief. It comes off of these irrational things being considered core aspects, core truths about how you lead your life. This whole idea that you have a personal religion that doesn't affect anything else in your life is a fallacy. It's a lie. I do not know too many people who have true religious beliefs about how they think the world came to be that don't actually affect their life. Hell, people have favorite sports teams and it affects their life. People have favorite foods and favorite foods, it affects your life in a certain way. It's not going to be as bad as, hey, like we're going to kill somebody. But if you have a certain food and someone's like, hey, we're having a party and we're going to be serving this, you might think, hey, I'm going to go, and then you might end up going and like meeting your wife or something like that. Whereas if somebody wasn't actually offering that food, if it's like, hey, we're having a barbecue, it's a vegan barbecue, we're not having meat, you're like, I'm not going to go. But then if you actually had a meat one and you go and you find out that maybe there's a woman there who's a vegan and but she came to the barbecue anyway, and then you end up meeting her. So anyway, this whole thing, your beliefs do affect the way you live your life. Part of the reason there's currently a lot of strife in certain parts of India is due to things like this, is due to religion. They're talking about, oh, we're having these persecution. These, I think, in Myanmar or something like that, majority of the people are Muslim there. They're persecuting other people. Then India said, we're going to let the minorities from that area come in, but we're not letting the Muslims come in. And then in those areas in the border, because these are the borders, this is the way countries are, a big amount of the population in those border areas are Muslim. And now they're like, oh, you're trying to get Muslims out here, you're persecuting the Muslims who are in India, even though their claim is that the Muslims in Myanmar are persecuting those people who need to now go across the border. All these issues are coming from irrational things. Let's encourage skepticism. Let's encourage rationality. Let's encourage fact finding and finding solid, stable, reliable ways to find truth and base our future on that. Okay, goodbye.